Welcome to another edition of the Young Kings podcast, where we talk about pertinent issues relevant to society that are affecting our young kings and the African community, the Black community in general, and anybody who's into the anti-racist movement or who is a soldier for humanity, a soldier of the light. So it's not exclusive to Black people. It's anybody really who lends themselves to humanitarian thinking and morality. That's what we're dealing with here. And what we want to do is we want to look at pertinent issues in society, that break down and look at oppressive forces that are dealing with immoral, evil regimes that oppress people and cause people misery unnecessarily for the purposes of power of a very minuscule few. So that's what we're dealing with. So welcome to another edition. I want to point directly to Bernie Sanders, the senator in America, the American Senator Bernie Sanders, who has run for president, the Democratic presidential campaign many times, Bernie Sanders. Not sure if he's running again this time round, but he could be. But Bernie Sanders, and something that I saw that was very pertinent and very powerful that I thought, and it confirmed what I'd been saying all along. Incredibly, it just really reinforced what I'd said previously in previous posts. And that was that essentially the point I was making is that reality is not racist. Wherever you're dealing with reality is truth. It is light. Okay? It lights the way forward. It is a positive. Yeah? It is part of a mathematical equation that is a plus. We're not dealing with negatives. We're dealing with positives. Okay? Mathematical equations of positives, things that exist, truths that exist, that present themselves. Okay? We're not dealing with darkness, the obfuscation of reality or truth. Okay? We're not dealing with obscurity. We're not dealing with ambiguity. We're not dealing with ambivalence. We're dealing with reality, truth and reality where we find. Okay, that's what we want. And that's what reality is, okay? Because you can't argue with it. Reality is tangent and it is real. And that's what we want to be dealing with, really. And that's what we want to do. Because often evil regimes and oppressive regimes deal with darkness or the obfuscation of reality or truth. And it alters it. It deals with mythology and creates particular narratives, okay, that facilitate oppression, okay, through contorting and disturbing reality, okay, with false narratives and creating a picture and distorting history, okay, and presenting its own narratives that overshadow, okay, through the bombardment of Eurocentric ramblings on particular subjects of oppression like race, okay, and particular racial groups, which it seeks to oppress. So it obscures their history and prevents that historical narrative from seeing the light of day. And so anyway, I digress slightly. What we're dealing with is the fact that, going back to my point of the fact that racism is not reality, because it is truth and it is light. And wherever you have truth, you have light. Okay? You have progression. You have movement in the right direction. Okay? Because we're dealing with what's going on. And so that's what we want. We want truth. And so what Bernie Sanders said was in relation to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that's going on over there. And what he's saying is that it is not anti-Semitism to point out the reality of the oppression of Israeli forces against Palestinians, okay? And he pointed out the fact that 38,000 Palestinians have been murdered by Israeli forces in one way or another. And I think it was 78,000 or around that number have been wounded. And that 70% of those deaths and the wounded are women and children, okay? Which we can assume to be innocent civilians, at least the children at least. And I'll say a large proportion of the women, if we're talking about, if we're trying to really deal with Hamas, which has been the dominant narrative that is Hamas. But when you're looking at the numbers there, okay, 34,000 murdered Palestinians, 78,000 wounded, and 70% of that is women and children. Okay, that points to something going terribly wrong there. That doesn't suggest Hamas to me immediately. Okay, that doesn't suggest Hamas to me. And so that's what we're dealing with. And so he goes on as well to point out that through the Israeli bombardment, through their arms and the bombing or whatever they've gone on with, I think it's bombing, 221,000 housing units in Gaza have been wiped out. Okay, meaning that 1 million Palestinians have been made homeless through the conflict. So we're looking at these numbers, and what he's saying is that this is not anti-Semitism to point this out. This is the reality of an extremist regime that is highly oppressive. Okay? And I find it hard to argue with that reasoning. That's sound. That is absolutely sound reasoning. That's reality. That's pointing out something that you're doing. Right? That's pointing out what you're actually doing. And I find it hard to create an argument or to convince me that pointing out what you're doing is racist or anti-Semitism. Because I've pointed out before, my idea, okay, it might change. There might be some slight nuance that exists in terms of anti-Semitism as a dimension of racism, but that is slightly separate due to the nuance of the cultural and racial specifics of what's going on and the particular type of oppression that's gone on. Mainly the Nazi oppression, the German oppression of Jews, which is the main dominant one that we're dealing with. And so I can understand that there's a particular nuance and a particular specificity that exists in terms of the Jewish oppression and the genocide committed by the by the Nazis. So I can understand that there are sensitivities there. So situations that you don't want to really associate Jewish people with Nazi goings on or relate them to their oppressors, and that is anti-Semitism. Of course, the Holocaust denial is obviously anti-Semitism and is an absolute nonsense. Okay, it's reality. Okay, we deal with reality. The Holocaust, reality. The oppression of Jews, reality. We're dealing with reality. Okay, that's not going on. Somebody's trying to say that that's not happening. That's anti-Semitism at its height. Because that's oppressive, that's denying reality. And we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with truth and light and humanity. That's what we're dealing with. So, okay, there's some sensitivities going on. But my point is that, and I made this some time back, is that in terms of the African or the Afrocentric dimension of oppression that's taken place at the hands of Europeans, okay, European or the Eurocentric narrative has not shied away from comparing Africans to oppressive figures, okay? To saying that African figures have been dictators, have been oppressive in their goings on. And often in terms of the African leaders, in terms of African nations, because of the colonialism and the slavery that's gone on, you've had African leaders that have taken on the colonialist posture. Yeah, you've had African leaders that have taken on colonialism or the colonialist posture from previous oppressive regimes. They've inherited that particular regime. And so they've taken it on. And essentially they've been caretakers of a colonialist regime. Just in terms of an African body, but in terms of the colonialism almost continuing, a neo-colonialism, if you will, a new form of colonialism that's gone on there, okay? And there's been no shying away from that in pointing out and critiquing Africa and African leaders and oppressive African regimes, things that have gone wrong there. Rather, things that have gone wrong in Africa. There's been no shying away from it. At all. There's been none of this, Africans were part of the largest genocide in history. And so what we're not going to do is we're not going to link African political leaders with their previous colonial masters. There's been none of that. Africans have been called out. in the loudest voices and in the loudest form. They've been called out and condemned by Eurocentric media, okay? And Eurocentric media has covered African oppressive regimes with absolute delight. There's been no shying away from any of that. So could we call that racist then? The fact that you're calling out what African leaders have done that have been similar to their colonial masters. So therefore that is racism. You're not allowed to call out African oppressive regimes because they're similar to the colonial regimes that existed historically. That's the logic that would follow. But we're not doing that. We're calling them out. So then why can't we call out other people and call out other forms of oppression? Okay? That's what I'm thinking. If somebody says to me, okay, that I'm behaving, for example, in Southeast London, you know, there've been gangs that have been rampant, gangs that have been doing terrible things, you know, in Southeast London. You had the gangs that existed there in my time. I think the most common ones that have been represented by, I think it's the Blue Story or Blue Borough and things like this, have been in Southeast London, has been Ghetto Boys versus Peckham Boys or whatever it might be. Okay, and they've done some horrible things in terms of that. And we experienced that as school kids. So if somebody said to me that I was being a bully and I was acting like a ghetto boy or I was acting like a Peckham boy, and what are you doing? That would shock me. That would shock me into thinking, right, I'm behaving like my oppressor or an oppressive force. Jesus, that's terrible. Those guys are wicked. So I need to sort myself out and not be like that person. But in somebody pointing that out, to me, that's shocking you. That should shock your brain to say, Jesus, I don't want to be that way. Christ, am I behaving like that? I'm behaving like that monster. So I need to sort myself out. It's a shock, okay? Okay? It's a shock to the brain. Okay? It's an electric shock that should wake you up out of your madness. That's what it should be doing. Should be shying away from reality. And for me, if Israeli forces are carrying on in an extremist, genocidal way that resembles oppressive regimes historically that I will not name, then why not call them out for it? Because they should be saying, hang on a minute, my previous oppressors were monsters that we've been calling out and campaigning against. They were absolute monsters. And hang on a minute, we're actually behaving like these people. What the hell are we doing? Let's stop it immediately. That reality should wake you up. That logic follows. And I've used myself as an example, and I've used Africa as an example of which is my ancestry. Okay, so I've started at home. And what should be good enough for me and what I would apply to myself and how I would like to be treated and how I would react myself is what I'm applying to others. I've started with myself. And that's what you do. You want to be treated as other people, and you're looking at inaccuracies that have gone on in relation to yourself and your own culture and your own race, and you're using the same yardstick that you're measuring yourself and your culture and your race by and applying it to others. To me, that's sound. That's sound reasoning. Okay, void of distortion. And so Bernie Sanders talking about the fact of the figures that I've given you in terms of the 34,000 Palestinians that have been murdered, mainly women and children, the 78,000 wounded, again, 70% women and children, and then the 221,000 housing units that have been destroyed in Gaza, in Palestine, making 1 million Palestinians homeless. Pointing that out, that is not anti-Semitism, and that's what Bernie Sanders pointed out. It's not anti-Semitism at all, because you're pointing out a reality of genocidal, oppressive, extremist violence of the worst kind possible. That's not, and I can't see what that's got to do with being racist at all, which is what anti-Semitism is. It's a unique form of racism, but it is part of the racist famine, that form of oppression. It falls into racism. Okay? If anti-Semitism isn't racism, then racism is its sister or its brother. There's some nuance that I've talked about, okay? There is nuance, okay? There are subtleties there, but essentially it is racism of a particular kind. Okay? Yes, the context is specific in terms of the type of oppression, but essentially anti-Semitism is racism against Jewish people. Okay? And the Jewish humanitarian project. Okay? Of emancipating yourself and recognizing the historical oppressive regimes that have been there and the oppression of Jews and moving away from that towards humanity and light. That's what we want. That's what we're dealing with. And to rid itself of Jewish stereotypes and to really have the truth of Jewish people revealed and their humanity made clear, void of distortion, which is what racism is. It's distortion. Okay? That's what we're dealing with. Racism is distortion. It is darkness. It moves away from truth and light, and it deals with mythologies that obfuscate truth and reality in order for dominant oppressive regimes to maintain in power and oppress those that are beneath it in a power play. And so mythologies of those people that it's oppressing is necessary in order for those people to not matter and to allow the oppressive regimes to continue and for the oppressive regimes to have a rationale to oppress others and to have an excuse as to why they reside at the top and why others reside at the bottom and to maintain that monopoly of power. Okay? That's its basis. So, yeah. That's what we're dealing with there. So Bernie Sanders made that very perfectly clear. And I'm in agreement. The reasoning is sound. And I would like somebody, okay, to challenge me as to why reality in any way, shape or form could be racist. How can reality of what you're doing and somebody naming what you're doing be racist? Okay. Please, somebody come back to me. Somebody try and pose an argument to me that convinces me and others that reality in some ways can be racist. I can't see it in any way, shape or form how reality can be racist. Okay, you've got racist stereotypes. I've used this one before. People being called lazy, black people being called lazy historically. Right. If I'm being lazy, I happen to have dark skin. I'm a black person. If I'm being lazy and somebody calls me lazy who's white or whatever they may be, and they call me out for behavior that I'm actually doing, that's not racist. I'm an individual, irrespective of race, that's being lazy. Okay? Doesn't matter if it falls into a stereotype. If somebody's calling me out for being lazy, that's not racist in any way, shape or form. The fact that there's a stereotype about it is irrelevant. If I'm working hard, okay, and the reality of the situation is I'm a hard worker and I'm grafting, and somebody assumes that I'm lazy and calls me lazy and labels me something which is contradictory to what I am because of a stereotype or for what they assume is the case, based on racial stereotypes, that's racist. There's a distinction there, okay? And I would have to accept that because me being lazy and somebody calling that out, that would be me, that is truth. And that truth can only help me to recognize that I'm exhibiting negative behaviors that are not helpful to myself, that are contradictory to my own elevation, and for me to check that behavior and get it right. And it's somebody else, it's their duty to call out the reality that I'm being lazy, if that's what I'm doing, in order that I can check myself and adjust and stop being lazy and start working hard to get to where I want to be and be a better person. There's no racism in that. And my friends and anybody of whatever colour should challenge me if I'm exhibiting negative behaviours. The fact that I'm black should not, exempt me from reality in any way, shape or form. In fact, Eurocentric society and white supremacy is quite quick to call that the race card. To pull in the race card. Okay? And if you're going to say that anti-Semitism is calling you out for what you're doing, then that seems pretty close to pulling the race card yourself. albeit called anti-Semitism. If somebody's calling you out for doing something that you're doing and you're calling them anti-Semitism so that you can carry on doing what's wrong, that is playing the race card. That's what it's doing. But nobody dare call it that. I don't know what's going on. Why can I be called that I'm playing the race card? And people are quite quick and easy to say that black people are playing the race card, okay, to protect themselves. But when people are trying to, when the Israeli oppressive regime is protecting itself under the umbrella of anti-Semitism, to defend itself, to defend and protect itself with negative oppressive behaviors, and to challenge anybody, to label anybody that challenges them anti-Semitism, that's playing the race card. That's what it's doing. Because you're protecting yourself. You're allowing yourself to be immune from critique. You're allowing yourself to be immune from critique, to be exempt from the rules that govern the rest of humanity. And the word for that is supremacy. That means that you are supreme. You exist in a rarefied air that does not apply to others. And that is sound reasoning. That is supremacy of the highest order. Because what you're doing is you're exempting yourself from the rest of humanity. So that must mean that the rest of humanity is beneath you and you exist in a different sphere. And if that's the case, somebody needs to explain to me why you are supreme, why you are better than me, and what qualifies you to exist in a space where you are exempt from critique. Okay? I need an answer to that. Explain it to me. Because I don't understand. It's not apparent to me with the senses that I've been given, the senses and the brain that I've been given, okay? It's not apparent to me, that line of reasoning, okay? It's not apparent to me. It's not adding up to me at all. I'm so sorry, but it isn't. And I need it explained to me in full. And I would like someone to challenge me and to explain this reason for this supremacy and why it's okay. Okay? Because black people are not getting away with that at all. It's called the race card. And we are not exempt. We are pointed out every step of the way. But suddenly, anti-Semitism is being used as a term for people who are calling out reality. I need to know how the two differ, okay, is my line of reasoning, because to me that is a sound reason, okay, that is sound reasoning to create that parallel. And I won't continue to go on about it. I've mentioned it and I've made it very clear. I'd like somebody to really bring that to light for me, to educate me onto that, okay, and to persuade me, okay. Sound reasoning is done through persuasion. Not bombardment, okay? Not whacking somebody over the head with your rantings. It's done through persuasion. And that is a sign of sound reasoning, being persuaded by a sound argument based on reality. And I think that that's what I've set out here today. And if it's not, I need someone to really sort that one out. But that's my line of reasoning, okay? Because Bernie Sanders really reignited that fire for me. Okay, racism is not reality, and I want someone to challenge me on that. So that's that one. I won't carry on much further. That's what I pointed out. I think that summarizes everything I've wanted to say on the issue. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm somebody who is an advocate for humanity wherever it lies. That is humanity in terms of the way women are treated. That is humanity in terms of all human beings and their freedom to be seen in the reality of their humanity, okay? And for that not to be obscured. And for me, that includes Jewish people, Okay? The truth of who Jews are and their humanity needs to be observed. Good or bad, and racist stereotypes or anti-Semite stereotypes need to be removed, okay, and expunged from the conversation, okay? They need to be removed because they're not reality, okay? And they're oppressive. And that's darkness. That's not light. Only truth can be light, okay? We're not dealing with shadows here and obscurity, okay? So I'm going to leave it there for now. And that's my line of reasoning. And as far as I'm concerned, it's very sound. So I wanted to point that out to the community, to the community, to the soldiers of the light, to the humanitarians out there who are fighting for justice, who are fighting for freedoms all over the planet, all over the globe, and for those who are there to fight against oppression and inhumane practices wherever it may lie. And so that's my argument for the humanitarian project. Okay, and I hope it's received as such, because that's what I deem myself as, a soldier of the light. Okay, and the humanitarian project. And I'll leave it there. But I needed to point that out to the young kings and to the community at large, because I think it's a very important point that needs to be made there in terms of oppressive regimes and how they're functioning. And I'll leave it there. Bye-bye for now.